Hello students, this is Vaishali Korea and today we will discuss the array concept in C programming language. To understand this, we'll take a simple application where we want to store the marks of CCP subject of one student, right? And then we want to print whether that student is pass or fail based on the marks that he gets in that examination. Okay, now here the maximum marks of the CCP subject that one student can get is 30. So total marks of this subject is 30, right? If student has the marks of greater than equal to 12, then he or she will be considered as pass. Otherwise, the student will be considered as fail. Okay, so we have been given the aim of the program, that what actually we want to do, right? Then we have been given the restrictions also and the criteria also, based on which we can print our output. Okay, so now if we want to implement this scenario, right, then first we need to think about the input. For any program we have to discuss or decide the input, that how many inputs are required, what can be the data type of the input, how we can take the input value. So this thing should be decided for input. Now next is the we have to decide the output, that what can be the output, whether it is a string, matlab it is a simple message, or it's a certain value, or it's more than one values. So all these things will be decided for the output also, and in between we have to write the logic that will analyze our input and gives us the output. Okay, so this is true for every program. Decide the input, decide the output, and then decide the logic. Okay, so for our application we have to store the marks of one student, right? So we require a one very single integer, okay, that will store the marks of the student. Okay, then after we will print one message, and then a scanf will be used to take the marks at runtime from the user. Okay, and that marks will get stored in this CCP marks variable. Now if the marks is greater than equal to 0 or less than equal to 30, so if both the conditions are true, right, then what we need to do, we have to check for the criteria, right? If the marks is valid, right, then if it is greater than equal to 12, we have to print that congratulations, you have passed this exam. And if the marks is not greater than equal to 12, that means the CCP marks is less than 12. So in that case we have to print this else. Okay, that sorry, you have failed this exam. Okay, and if this condition is false, that means your input is not valid. Okay, so in that case this else will get executed and it will print the message that entered marks is not valid. Okay, so this is how you can implement this application. But now think that uh, if I want to execute the same scenario for more than one student, right, then what changes I have to make in this program, right? First thing, I have to take 5 variables. Suppose I want to execute the program for 5 students, then I have to take 5 variables. Okay, I have to scan 5 values, and this entire scenario should be implemented for 5 students, because here we have checked only for 1 marks, right? And if I want to change the application from 1 to 5 students, I have to check for the 5 marks. Okay, so this is obviously not feasible, because one class cannot contain only 5 students also. The class can have more than 50 or 60 students, right? So this is not feasible when we want to check the program for more than one student. Okay, so is there any facility that will create a group of the CCP marks, right? And in that group, I can store more than one student's marks. So is it possible or not, right? So if we change our application like that, we want to store the marks of 5 students of the same CCP subject, and then we want to find out the average marks of the CCP subject, right? So what we can do in that case? So here for this application, inputs and output is also given, right? That input can be this 5 marks, okay, and output is this string average class marks of CCP subject, and the value that should be printed is 21.6 based on these marks. Okay, so if I want to do this, then what are the things that I have to decide? Okay, so if I want to take the one variable CCP, so can I store more than one variable or more than one values in that? So what can be the data type, what can be the size of the input, how to take the input, right? And if I am creating a group, right, so how I can access the individual element from that group, right? How I can display the answer or output. So all these things we need to discuss. Okay, so for this kind of scenario, there is a concept of array in C programming language. Okay, so here in this example, you can see that one CCP marks variable or array. Here this is the array, right? It is taken CCP marks, the data type is taken as integer, and here in the square brackets size is specified. Okay, so in this CCP marks we can store total 5 integer values. Okay, so int CCP marks in square bracket 5 is equal to 5 values we have written in the curly braces. Okay, so these are the value of this array. Now here one another variable is taken average CCP marks, and it is initialized with 0. Now we'll see the memory allocation, right? We have declared the array of certain size, we have initialized that array with certain values, but how actually those things are stored in memory? Okay, so to understand this, first we'll see the memory allocation of a simple variable. Okay, so here you can see that if we declare one integer a, right, single integer, so integer is taking 2 or 4 bytes, right, based on your machine, right? Now suppose integer is taking 2 bytes, right? So that integer will get stored in the primary memory of a computer. Okay, so what is the structure of the primary memory? So that structure is like this, one dimensional structure. Okay, so this box is called one cell, right? And every cell has an address associated with it, that is called memory address. Okay, so one cell of size 1 byte, every cell has a size of 1 byte. Okay, every cell has an address. The address will start with 0 up to the memory capacity of the computer. Okay, now suppose you are declaring this integer a, and at that time 200 location is free. Okay, so suppose this memory is shown from the 200 location. So these are the addresses of the different cells, 200, 201, 202, like this. Okay, up to the capacity of the memory, right? Now when you are declaring a variable integer a, so at that time what happens in the primary memory? It will reserve the place where you can store the value of a. Okay, so by declaring this integer a, 2 bytes will be reserved in the memory to store the value of a. Okay, like this. So this 2 bytes, 200 and 201, will get reserved to store the value of a. Okay, now when you are writing a is equal to 3, okay, so the 3 will be placed uh, at the location reserved for a, right? So 3 will be placed here. Okay, now in the program, if you want to access this 3, right, so there are two ways. You can use the variable name. So in your program, if you have written a, then this will be replaced with 3. Okay, and also you can access the value using the memory address. If you say that what is the value of a, it will be 3, and if you say that what is the value stored in the 200 location, it is also 3. Okay, so 200 is the address of variable a, right? And address can be displayed using the address of operator. So address of operator A, so it will give you 200. So that you will see in detail in the pointers chapter. Okay, and remember this thing, when you are writing integer A, actually we don't know that where the A's value will be stored. Memory address allocation would be completely depending on the system. We cannot do anything in that, right? We cannot assign any address to any variable, right? We cannot write like this. This is not correct. Okay, so this is the memory allocation of a simple integer variable. Okay, now if we see the memory allocation of this one dimensional array, right? So here you can see that A is the array of 5 size and the data type is integer, and total 5 integer values are there. Okay, now if I want to allocate memory to this thing, it will be allocated automatically by the system. Okay, but how it actually allocated? So this is the suppose memory structure. These are the addresses of every cell, or every cell, right? Every cell has size of 1 byte. So this cell's address is 200, next is 201, like this. Okay, now in this integer array, we have all the integers, so every integer is taking 2 bytes, right? So first 2 bytes will be allocated for all the elements of the array. Okay, now here integer a5, that means we have the 5 elements. Okay, the first element is a0, the second element is a1, third is a2, fourth is a3, and fifth is a4. So here total 5 elements. Okay, but how those elements are differentiated? So it will be based on their indices. So the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, these are the indices of the array, index or subscript. Okay, array index always starts with 0. Okay, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Correct? So total 5 elements, but indices starts from 0 to size minus 1. If the size is 5, the index of the last element is 4. Okay, if you are declaring one array A of suppose 100 size, okay, then the last element would be A of 99. When you are declaring the array and you are giving one number, so that is the size of the array. But when you are writing simply like A99, so this is the element of the array. Okay, so that we'll see in detail. Okay, now when you are doing this kind of initialization, right, the values will be stored in their respective elements. A0 would be 20, A1 would be 45, A2 would be 67, like this. Okay, now another statement here is what C arrays performs no bound checking. Now what does that mean? So here you can see that integer a5, that means the last element is a4. Okay, but still if you try to access a of 5 or a of 6, then it will not give you an error, it will give you the random number. Okay, so in the implementation you have to be careful while using the array indices. If the arrays are of 5 size, then your index should be up to 4 only. If you are trying to access a of 5, then it would not give you any error, but it will give you the wrong number or wrong value. Okay, so this is because array performs no bound checking. Okay, now if you are declaring the same 5 size of integer array, right, then actually how many elements it will take? 5 elements. Okay, and how much memory it will take? How many bytes it will take to store the 5 elements? Okay, so you can see that each element is taking 2 bytes. Obviously 5 elements are taking total 10 bytes. So here you can see for A total 10 bytes are required. Okay, and suppose the base address is 200. Now base address is what? Base address is from where the memory allocation would get started. Obviously all the locations are not free, so it will try to identify the one free slot, right, and start the memory allocation for the array from there. Okay, so here total this 5 elements a0 a1, so this A is the array name, The 0, 1, 2, 3 are the index or subscript. Okay, now this index or subscript can be integer constant, it can be integer variable, or any expression that gives you integer. Okay, now if the base address is 200, so base address is also the address of the first element of the array. So A0's address is 200, so 200 201 will be for A0, so 202 203 for A1, like this. Okay, now suppose you have declared array of 5 size, right, but 10 contiguous bytes are not available. So in that case, memory allocation would get failed. Okay, because array allocates contiguous memory to store the elements. So if you know the base address, you can easily find out the address of any other element. Okay, so if the 10 consecutive bytes are not available for this array, memory allocation would be failed. Okay, now we'll see other examples. One float array of 2 size, right? Values are given at compile time, so this is initialization. So how many bytes are required to store the values of this array? So two elements, every element is float type, so every element is taking 4 bytes, right? So two elements will take 8 bytes, so total 8 bytes are there, and this 4 bytes is for amount of 0 and other 4 bytes are for amount of 1. Okay, now if you take the character array and you have initialized this welcome, right, so the last character in this array is null, right, because you have used here double quote, so it will be considered as a string. Okay, now every character value is taking 1 byte to store, right? So here is the memory, here are the addresses, and these are the spaces reserved for individual character of this array, right? And in every location 1 character will be stored, and at the last null will be stored. Okay, so this will be considered as a string also, right? Now based on all the discussions that we had, now if we want to define the array, if we want to give any formal definition of the array, then what it can be, right? So array is a data type and it is a structured data type. Okay, all the elements are arranged like this, right? And there are 3 types of data type actually overall. So primary type, derived type, and user defined type, right? So what is the type of the array? So array is a derived data type. Okay, because it is just making a group of the existing data type like integer, float, character, like this. Okay, so array is a derived data type. Also, the definition is what? Array is a collection of data that stores fixed number of values of the same type, means integer of certain size, and it is a collection of data. Okay, and which are the operations that we can perform on the array? So array would allows you for efficient storing, accessing, and manipulation of the data items. Okay, so there are many applications where this concept can be used. If you want to make a list of the students in one batch or one class or branch, or if you want to list out the employees in one department, institute, or university. Okay, if you want to store the marks of the students of certain subjects, so in all these things this concept can be used. Now there are different ways how you can initialize the array. So the first method is integer a5 and 5 values are written in the braces. Okay, so total 5 elements array will be there, and all the 5 values will be assigned in the respective elements, right? Is 0 to a4, and all the values are initialized by the given values. Okay, now next one is where you have declared the array of 5 size, right, but you have not specified any value, just empty curly braces. So in this case all the elements will be initialized with 0 by default. Okay, now integer a5, 1 and 2 only. So array is of 5 size but only 2 values are given, so in this case Two values will be assigned, but the remaining values will be by default initialized with 0. Okay. Now in the next method, array has been declared, but size has not been specified. Okay, and two values are initialized. So these two values will go in the first and second element of the array, right? And the size of this array will be 2, right? Based on the values given here in the initializers. Okay. Now in the next one, array size has not been specified, but 4 values are given. So 4 values will be stored in the 4 respective elements. Okay, but here the size of the array is 4. So based on these values. Also, there is another method of finding the size of the array. What is that? First, you can write size of A. Size of A means what? The size of the entire array. Okay, so here you can see that there are 4 elements, and every element is taking 2 bytes. So 4 into 2, 8. So the size of the entire array A is 8, and size of A is 0. So that is the integer type. Okay, so it will take 2 bytes. So 8 by 2, which is 4. So size of this array A is 4. So for the array which has the larger number of elements, you can use this particular equation to find the size. Okay. Okay, now if you have used this character array, right, name, size has not been specified, and here the different characters are given. So the array size would be depending on the number of initializers, right? So it would be 6 in this case, right? Name of 0 would be H, name of 1 would be E, like this, right? And this null character at the end specifies that this name can be treated as a string. Okay, if you have not written this null character, then this is simply a character array, right? So you have to use the ways to print and to get the values that you are using for the arrays. Okay, but if you use this null character, then the string functions like format specifier %s or the string functions getS and putS can be used with this name. Okay, now the next is size is given, array size is given, and here is the string, right? So all the characters will be stored in the respective elements, right? And the last one, name 4, would be initialized with null. Next, if CT array has been declared of 5 size and you have specified only one character B, right, then CT0 is equal to B, but the remaining elements will be initialized with the null. Okay, now if you are taking integer array of 3 size, right, and you are trying to use 4 initializers, right, then it will give you an error. Okay, the number of initializers cannot be greater than the size of the array. Okay, now suppose the array is of 5 or 10 size, then it would be okay if you are giving this kind of initializers, right? But suppose if you have the array of 100 size, so it is not feasible to give individual value to the 100 elements, okay, at compile time. So in that case, what you can do, this I is representing the index or subscript, so you can use the for loop that will execute from 0 to 99. Okay, now if the value of I is less than 50, so you can initialize those elements like sum of 0, sum of 1, so up to sum of 49. Okay, so up to this the values will be 0.1, means these elements 0 to 49 will be initialized with 0.1, otherwise the remaining elements will be initialized with 1.0. So if the array size is large, you can use this kind of for loop to initialize the array elements. So this is called runtime initialization, right? The previous examples were of the compile time initialization. Okay, now we will come to our program, right, where we want to store the marks of 5 students and then we want to find out the average. Okay, so we have declared one array ccp marks of 5 size and these are the values. Okay, so this is the representation that CCP marks 0 would be 30, CCP marks 1 would be 12, like this. Okay, now one variable which is initialized with 0 that stores the average CCP subjects marks. Okay, now here if I want to print the array elements, okay, so what I can do here, I am not going to print only one value, I have to print 5 values. Okay, and you can here check the subscript of the array elements 0 1 2 3 4, right? It is in the increasing order by 1, right? So instead of this index you can take one variable, right? Initially it was 0 and you can place I here, right? So CCP marks I which is 0, so it will access the first element. Now in the second iteration you can increment the value of I, right? So it would be 1, so you can access the second element of the array. Okay, so using this concept you can use the for loop, right, where I would execute from I would have the value of 0 to 4. Okay, less than 5 means it will execute up to 4. Okay, and here you have to write only one printf, right, that marks of student percentage d is percentage d. So this percentage d will print the value of the array element. When I is equal to 0 in the first iteration, it will print the value of CCP marks 0 means 30. In the next iteration value of I becomes 1, so it will print the value of the CCP marks 1. Okay, so this percentage d is printing the value of the array elements. Okay, and this percentage d in the square bracket, that this will print the index. Okay, but student 0 student 1 this won't look good, so that's why here I plus 1 has been written. So in the output you will have like this student 1 student 2 student 3, like this. Okay, actually the array index starts from 0, but while printing we are using this method. Okay, so this is how you have initialized the values and you have printed those values. Okay, now we want to find out the average. So for the average we have to do the addition of all the values and then we have to divide by the size of the array. Okay, so here this another for loop is used to find out the summation of the marks of all students. Okay, so here shorthand operator is used plus equal to. So when I is equal to 0, first element's value will be taken, right, and it will be added to the average CCP marks. Okay, in the next iteration CCP marks 1, that value will be taken and added to the average CCP marks. So after the completion of this for loop, in the average CCP marks we will have the summation of all the marks. Okay, and at the end we can print the answer using this equation, average CCP marks divided by 5, which is the size of the array. So this would be your output. This message, this for loops output is this, the marks printed for all the students, and the last printf will give you the answer. But answer that we want is 21.6 and here we get the answer 21. Okay, why? Because here in the equation this average CCP marks and this 5 both are integer. Okay, so when you are performing the division on two integers, right, it will give you only the integer answer, right? So answer is actually 21.6, but it will take only integer part and print it because you have used your percentage d and the data type of the variable is integer. Okay, so what is the solution of this? This is the typecasting. Okay, so one of the operand should be converted to float, then your output would be in the float type. Okay, now if we want to input the values of the array elements at runtime, because every time for the program we don't know the values at compile time. Okay, we want to execute the program for different values. Okay, so in that case the user has to enter the values while executing the program. So this is possible using the scanf. Okay, but how to use this scanf for the array, right? Because not only one element, we have to use more than one elements. Okay, so this is the first method. So in this method, the array is of 5 size, so declaration is here, right? And we have to write 5 times percentage %d, and here we have to use 5 element names with the address of operator, address of A0, 1, 2, 3, like this. Okay, when you are declaring 5 size integer, obviously the last element's index is 4. So we have to write all this 5 elements and 5 times percentage %d, right? But consider that array size is 100. So what you will do? You have to write 100 times percentage %d, and 100 variables you have to write with the address of operator, right? So this is not feasible, right? So the second method is you can use the for loop. Okay, because array indices are in the increasing order. It always starts with the fixed value, and the last value will depend on the size of the array. Okay, size minus 1. So here you can start the value of I with 0, I less than 5. That means that this for loop will execute up to 4 value. Okay, and it will be incremented by 1 every time. So when I is equal to 0, scanf will be executed, integer value would be entered, and that value will get stored in A of 0. Okay, in the next iteration, the value of I becomes 1. Okay, so the next value entered by the user will get stored in A of 1. Okay, like this. So last value will be stored in A of 4. Okay, so this is the another method by the help of which you can take the array element values at runtime. Okay, now we'll see the entire program that we had discussed to find out the average of the CCP marks of 5 students. Okay, so here the array has been declared, a sum variable where the summation will be stored, and this average CCP marks in which the average will be stored, and it is taken as float data type. Okay, now we will print the message. See, it is very important to print the relevant messages in the program, right? Suppose your program is executed by any person who is not known about the coding, that in which sequence you have done your coding, right? So it would be helpful for them, right, to understand that what would be the next step. Okay, so here the printf message is there, enter the marks of CCP subject of 5 students. So that message will be printed. Okay, now here using the scanf you have to take the 5 values CCP marks I, where I executes i's value would be from 0 to 4. But before entering the value, this message should be printed, that enter the marks of student percentage %d, and here I plus 1 is written. So enter the marks of student 1 will be displayed on the output, and there you have to enter 20. Okay, then after that 20 would be stored in this sum variable. Sorry, it will be added to the sum variable. Okay, and then after next iteration starts. In the next iteration also you have to, the next message would be printed, that enter the marks of student 2, right? Suppose user has entered 16, so that 16 will be stored in CCP marks 1, right? And that will be added to the sum variable again, right? So using this for loop you have to enter the 5 marks. Okay, and all these marks will be added to this sum variable. Okay, now this for loop is simply for printing the values of the array. Okay, here this would be the output of that printf, this. Okay, so here the value that we had entered, this 20, 16, 23, so we have to check whether all these values are stored in the array perfectly or not. So what we can do, we can simply print the array element values, right? If it is same as the entered values, then it would be okay, right? So here you can see that when I'm printing using percentage %d and CCP marks I, it is printing the perfect values that we had entered. Okay, so the allocation is right. Okay, now next we will print the summation. So summation of the marks is 95. Okay, now there are two ways to find out the average. Okay, you can use the equation average CCP marks is equal to sum divided by 5.0, right? So it will be printed here using percentage f, and also you can directly write down the equation in the printf. Okay, sum divided by 5.0, so it will give you the same output. Okay, here also if I have not written 5.0, then both the operands would be integer and it will give you 19, matlab it will give you the improper answer if the values are like that. Okay, so remember that one of the operand must be float to have the decimal values, sorry, the values with the points, decimal points. Okay, thank you.